Kia ora tātou whānau, welcome to another episode of the Paul and Henry Show. That's me, Paul, talking with Henry about stuff that you should probably know about to do your jobs as a good, competent regulator. In the last two sessions, we've talked about interviewing and the caution and how all that works, and we've talked about fairness, all of those things. Today we're going to be talking about how to ask questions and planning. And the reason I've structured it that way is because I think you need to know how you're going to ask the questions before you can plan. Like those things kind of go together. So one of the common mistakes that people can make when they're planning an interview is they go straight into writing a list of questions.
Right.
That's never going to work. You want your interview, whether it's under caution with a witness or with a potentially liable person, you want your interview to be conversational, right? And one of the fundamental rules that I always live by is no one cares what you've got to say. Right? No one cares what I've got to say as the interviewer.
Yes.
No one cares what I've got to say.
Yeah.
It's all about what they say. So a good interview, the balance of words would be stacked in favour of the person who's being interviewed.
Yeah, that's right. You told us that if you wrote a transcript and you removed all of your bits,
everything the interviewer says,
the transcript would still read really well and tell you what happened.
You're not just reading it going, yep, no, that sounds about right. Yeah, I agree. You know, you're actually getting the person to tell their story. Yeah. So a couple of things. When I think about questions, and there's lots of different ways to do this, and my experiences were born out of the PEACE model, and I'm not advocating for that either way. There's lots of other models. They're all good. My advice is find what works for you. So pick a model, give it a go, take the good bits out of it, find what works for you. But I like to ask questions in this way. I pick a topic, I frame it up, I explain to the person what the topic is and what I want to know about, and put the parameters around that. And then I ask an open question. So if it was a broad, I don't know anything about this, which I always assume, I say to the person, I might ask you some questions that you find unnatural because you know I know the answer, but I actually need to hear your side of it. I don't just anticipate or expect or assume that I know what's going on here. So you could ask a question that's very broad. So Henry, I'm talking to you about the company that you work for. I'd like to learn as much as I can about that company. Okay, so I've given him the frame. It's the company. I want to know as much as I can about that company.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah.
And then zip, right? And the zip's important, and that stays zip for a long time because extroverted people, half a second, they'll be responding. Introverted people can take up to 40 seconds to reply. They'll want to think about their answer. They might fudge around a wee bit with some, I'll just think about it for a second. Just keep that shut.
Yeah.
Right. And that seems really, really unnatural.
Yeah.
But just the best thing you can learn to do in an interview is keep your mouth shut.
Yeah. Because we've got the TED model too, which is tell me, explain to me, describe for me.
So frame up the question.
My bit of advice, which was let them fill the silence.
Yes, 100%.
You've got to, when people are thinking or thinking out loud, look at the ceiling, they don't need more words from you to prompt them.
100%.
They just need the space, and eventually they will fill the silence.
Yeah, so there's an interesting thing that happens too. As the interviewer, you have got some credibility, and you're educating them on how the interview's going to go.
Yeah.
So if I ask a question and you start answering and I interrupt you and ask another question, what I'm saying to you is keep your answers short. I know what I need to know, and you straight away will start telling me as little as possible because, you know, and I'm also saying I don't really care, you know, and you'll undermine that trust that's really important, and you'll stop talking, or you'll give me a selection of facts, or you'll assume that I already know because I'm saying so much.
Yeah.
So frame up the question, give them the topic. I really want to talk to you about the company that you're working for. I'd like to learn as much as I can about their company, please. So there's my big framing of it, giving you the parameters. And then I go to tell me about that, the TED's thing. So tell me about the company, Henry. And then I'm going to take some, I would have told you this already, I'm going to take some notes. And while Henry's talking, I'm going to write down some topic points. And let's just do an example. Tell me about the company. You can use Waka Kotahi.
Can I pretend I'm from a different company actually?
You can, and what I will do is interrupt you because otherwise we might go for like 45 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, look, well, we're just a concreting firm, and a couple of years ago we bought this big truck, and then somebody told us, if you've got a truck that big, you need a transport service license from Waka Kotahi. And look, I don't know what that's about. The boss put my name on the license, but I just drive the concreting truck around. I mean, we're a concreting firm. Yeah. I don't even know why you guys are what this transport stuff's about.
Sure. I wouldn't normally stop it there, but I'm going to now just because we're doing this. So my topic points were concreting. 2 years ago, bought a big truck. Someone told you had to get a TSL. Your boss told you to sign it. You had to get a license, and you just drive the truck around. So I've got there straight away. I've got 7 topic points.
Yeah.
Extra points that I can drill into. Now, let's say I kind of already knew all that, and that's just a bit of nice chat. But actually, I want to learn more about your boss.
Right.
So what I do is I go, and you've got to find your own way of doing this, because the repeat back thing can become a little bit awkward too, because you're educating the person. If I say too much, he's just going to explain it back to me, and it sounds different and weird. But it's also a good way to check, and it shows I'm listening. So find a good way to do this. So Henry, I've just made some notes, and what you basically told me was blah, 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 and I'll just go through what you said. You know, you're a concreting firm. About 2 years ago, you bought a big truck, and you go, yeah, that's right. And because I've gone zip, you might tell me 5 other things. And you go, oh, yeah, that's right. But I also forgot to mention. So I go, that's cool. I've got another 17 topic points or whatever, right? And now I go, that's a really great start, Henry. Thank you. I'm interested to learn about your boss. You've talked about your boss, but I've never really met that person.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that person?
Oh, yeah. We don't see him much. Like, he seems pretty busy. Sometimes he comes to the job sites, and whenever we see him, he's always just got heaps of instructions for us.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So now what I do is go into the 5 WHs.
Right.
So the who, why, when, where, what, how.
Yeah.
Okay. So who is he?
Paul Fenton.
All right.
And make sure I don't defame anyone else in this role play.
And I could just keep going through that until I've really fleshed out that topic point.
Yeah.
So big topic, narrow it down, an open question, make some notes, show them you're listening, narrow it down, until you get to the bit that you really need to know about.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things in planning is know your topics. So I did a 3-day interview once on a massive case, and I had 6 topic points, and my whole plan was 6 bullet points. And I spent about 2 or 3 weeks planning this.
Yeah.
Not continuously 2 or 3 weeks, but over 2 or 3 weeks I planned it.
Yeah.
And I had like 6 topic points on a page, and that was my whole interview plan. So if that lawyer had come in and said, show me the questions you want to ask, I would have said, these are the things I'd like to talk about. And it was big ticket stuff, But I knew in my head, if I stick to that framework of going, here's the topic point, I want to talk about the company, when they start talking, I'm going to get that big list of all those extra topic points, and I'm going to drill down, and I'm going to flesh out every single one of those.
Yeah, that's right. And that, again, helps you to keep that investigator's mindset.
It does.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yep.
So you have to
100%.
Go on a journey of discovery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The next thing I'm going to say, so when you're thinking about your planning, is be very clear what are the topics we need to talk about. The next thing you want to know is what are the gaps that I've got in my evidence, and what's the evidence that I've got.
Yeah.
Because there's some stuff that you have lots of evidence for, and you don't actually need them to tell you about it, but fairness and natural justice, you want to give them the opportunity to explain it. So one way to deal with that, if you're dealing with a liable person, is to have a folder of your evidence prepared, right? And you might say, Henry, I'm going to talk to you about these documents that we've got. From what it looks like when we look at all these together, that some of these have been falsified, and I'd like to hear your comments on those.
Yeah.
You okay with that? I'll give you some time to look through those. Just for the record, I'm handing you a copy of exhibit number blah, blah, blah. And just to confirm too, Henry, I sent this to you last week, so you had some time to look at it in advance with your lawyer who's here today.
Yeah.
And you'll go, yep, that's fine. And then you just pause. And you'll go, keep that zip shut, and you'll say something. You might say, on the advice of my lawyer, I'm not going to answer that question. And I'll go, thank you. I'll take my folder back. Little tip, never use originals. In case Henry decides to start eating them, which I've seen happen, or he rips them up or whatever, and they're your exhibits locked away neatly.
Yeah.
There's your copies.
Right. Okay. That is good advice.
Yeah. So you
don't offer them a thing of black coffee either.
No. Yeah. So they you've had the time to think about it, and we've dealt with that thing very quickly. So there might be some things in the interview that the topic points, the evidential questions that are going to be inflammatory.
Yep.
And everything might be super friendly up until that point.
Yes.
So you need to think carefully when you're doing your interview, at what point do I deal with the stuff that's inflammatory?
Yeah.
Because they'll know it's coming. Most of the time they'll know it's coming. If they know it's coming, deal with it early. Just deal with it early. Otherwise they'll be sitting there the whole time with that in their head. So just get that stuff out of the way, be really professional about it. I've had interviews before I've had to ask really personal questions, really sensitive questions around things that most people wouldn't openly want to talk about. And I actually had a conversation with the lawyer beforehand and said, I'm going to have to ask your client about these things.
Right.
They're sensitive things. Yeah. And the lawyer said, thank you very much for raising that with me. I'll have a conversation with him and let him know that's coming. So he knew it was coming, and it was, one of those things, if this is true, then you were having an affair sort of question.
Yeah.
Not relevant to the investigation. I don't need to know if the guy's having an affair, but it's going to come out.
Yeah.
So you
got it. Yep.
You need to deal with those things. So plan to deal with those things in a way that's really sensitive.
Yeah.
There's some schools of thought that like to stitch people into a story, and they teach people to go to basically dig a hole. So I ask you questions that I almost invite you to tell lies about.
Right.
And then I go, well, I've got this document.
Yeah.
How do you explain that? That's the quickest way to end an interview. I don't like that. I've had it done to me in role playing, and I wanted to walk out the door because I was like,
right.
Oh, you mongrel. I've trusted you and I've been talking to you, and you've sat there quietly while I have told you lie after lie after lie, and now you're just making me look really stupid.
Yeah.
So that's a tactic you need to work out for yourself. It probably comes with experience. If you think if someone is lying to you, have a plan for how you're going to deal with that. Because it's not helpful. And when it goes to court, just because someone's telling lies doesn't mean they're guilty. And judges will even give juries a caution around that.
Yeah, it means they're not credible, but
doesn't mean
if
they're
the
guilty.
things they have to say are not going to be the things that are going to get them off or the charge anyway, then their credibility might not actually, their lack of credibility might not actually help you.
Well, it can help them.
Yeah. So I think we talked previously about the proof-making model.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
So let's imagine now we're interviewing a potential accused person, and we're starting to shape up a picture of offences.
Yep.
So the proof-making model is to understand those offences, break down each of the elements, put it in a table, and understand what evidence do I have to prove each element, and who's my witness going to be in court to lead out that evidence. And there might be some gaps which you feel you can only get or you can best get from this interview.
Yes.
So, and in particular knowledge, if you have to prove that the person knew what they were doing or ought to know what they were doing, the interview is probably going to be your best chance to get that evidence in.
Yep.
But to your earlier point, there might be other elements of the offence where you feel you've already got plenty of evidence and it doesn't actually matter what this person says, but it's worth interviewing them
100%.
about it for various reasons, including to just kind of get the interview going, get them talking, build rapport, that kind of thing.
You also give your evidence more credibility. So if you've sourced a document from an office, for example, and then the person who is liable is confirming that that document is correct and it's their signature on it and all that stuff, you've got two things that support that piece of evidence. So it's in the interview and it's come from that other person. So if for some reason it gets thrown out because of how you obtained it from that person, it might still get in because of the interview. Okay, so if you're paying attention, you'll notice that we've changed location. And I think that's a really good segue into the next point. And that's around logistics. Make sure if you've got a room booked to have an interview, you've allowed yourself plenty of time. And as a rule of thumb, I always say, work out how long you think your interview will take and double it. Like allow plenty of time, because if your interview is conversational and it's thorough and you flesh out all of those topic points, you really don't know how far some of those things are going to go. And the last thing you want to be doing is having to rush, time pressures. And the person being interviewed needs to know, hey, look, I've set aside 3 hours for this interview, and you're signalling to them what you have to tell me is really important. You know, you don't want to start the interview and they go, mate, sorry, my smoko breaks up, I've got to get back to work, you know. Yeah, so when you're planning your interview, make sure that you, from a logistical point of view, make sure you've got plenty of time and you've got a location where it's suitable. When you're planning your interview, you need to be thinking about how am I going to record this. Most of you, I think you're out in the field, you'll be using a digital voice recorder. Video camera is best, but there's some practical aspects to that. But if you're using a digital voice recorder, you need to think about where we're going to do this interview. If we're sitting in the mill room at the trucking base, you know, there's going to be people coming and going. It's going to be noisy. You're going to have the background noise. There might be machinery and all of that stuff that will interfere with your recording. So you need to be planning your recording, where you're going to do all those logistical things. Have a think about who's going to be there. They're quite entitled to have support people there. That's sometimes a good idea. Have a think about who their lawyer might be, all of that stuff. And for all of those people, when you're doing your planning, have some pre-engagement conversations with them so they're clear about their roles. There is a tactic that I've used sometimes if you want to be a little bit cheeky, but you kind of think it has to happen. I actually ask the lawyer to explain their role.
Right.
So, you know, Henry, you've got your lawyer here with you today. Just so we're all really clear, my job is to ask the questions. I really want to hear what you've got to say. I just get you to the record, say your name, please, Mr. or Mrs. Lawyer?
Yeah.
And can you just clarify your role for us today, please? And they hate it because it's like, oh, you're putting me on the spot. But it's a bit of a reminder to say your job is to sit here and give your client advice. It's not to answer the questions.
Yeah.
So when you're doing, which does happen. So when you're doing your planning, think about if there's a lawyer present or a support person present, how am I going to politely deal with that if they start asking the questions or answering questions or shepherding or guiding too much or leading the person you're interviewing. So at the start, in your plan, when you're working out your introduction, one of the things you want to talk about on the recording is the roles.
Yes. That's a really good bit of advice too, particularly for support people.
Yeah. So one of the things too I think is important to talk about is pre-interview conversations. Be very, very careful with those things. The trap that some people can fall into is they'll go, righto, Henry, I want to talk to you about these things. I haven't cautioned you yet. I'm going to ask you these questions. What are you going to tell me? And you kind of have a cut a deal on what you're going to say.
Right.
You know, or you kind of get a confession or admissions, and then you go, okay, now we're going to turn the recorder on and I'll caution you. And they're going, well, hang on, this all sounds a bit dodgy.
Yeah, that's weird. I don't like that. I don't like the sound of that.
Yeah, and sometimes people might go, they might want to have a pre-interview conversation, but be very clear with them when you're having that hang on a second, I'm going to caution you now, mate, because I know this is a pre-interview conversation, but if you tell me stuff that's incriminating yourself, I need to make sure it's safe.
I don't like that.
It's dodgy.
Something's an interview or it's not. You can't invent something called a pre-interview conversation and pretend it's not an interview. If you're wanting to do something like that, please go and talk to your legal team.
Yeah, just avoid them. So the pre-interview conversation you should have is around logistics.
Yeah. And
that might be as simple as a phone call to go, Henry, are you cool if I pop round to your house tomorrow night? I've got your address. Is that correct? I'll turn up at 7. Is that fine? Look, we're probably going to need 2 hours. Is that enough
that's
time?
Scheduling. That's fine.
That's fine, right? If you're dealing with a big complex case, well, not even a big complex case, but where there's lawyers involved, it's going to go down the liability path. You want to think about in your planning, do I send them things in advance to consider so that when we raise them in the interview, it's not new. But equally, there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm going to send your client some things and you and your client some things to consider before the interview. There's a couple of things I'm going to keep up my sleeve for the interview because I want to see their reaction to them. And if you're upfront and honest about that stuff, most lawyers will be fine with it.
Yeah.
I have had one lawyer say to me once, I get that, but as soon as you ask the question, I'm going to stop the interview and give them some guidance anyway. And I said, that's fine, we'll play it that way. And that didn't happen as it turned out. Wow. I asked the question, they answered it, and the lawyer was going, oh, it's too late, he said it. It's so think about all of those things in your planning. Where are we going to have it? Who's going to be there? How will we deal with those people? What's the time frame so you don't get kicked out of your meeting room? What's the logistics around recording it? Have I got enough power source and all of those practical things? And are there any special considerations around that person that I need to know about? Is English their second language?
Yeah.
Have they got some sort of need for a support person, all of those types of things. And the underlying thing in all of your planning is fairness, fairness, and fairness. And it's your opportunity to show how professional you are as a regulator. It's your opportunity to show how well you've done your inquiries, that you've got all of your stuff there. You're organised, you know your evidence, you're professional in the way that you're interacting with the person, and all of that goes down really well.
Yeah.
And I think the best thing that can happen at the end of a good interview, particularly if there's a lawyer there, and my preference is to have a lawyer there. I think it just adds to the whole fairness of things. If they thank you for the way that you've treated their client and indicate this is, we can see you're doing everything right here. You're being appropriately firm. You're not going too light in the interest of fairness, but you're doing a really super thorough professional job. Yeah. And that equals guilty pleas.
Yes.
Which are nice.
Yeah. And the other parting thought from me is, if you're in that area where you're doing the proof-making model and you need to get evidence from this interview, be really clear on your planning going in.
Yes.
What do I absolutely have to get out of this interview, if possible, if they tell me, but what do I absolutely have to get out of this interview to help my case? What one or two or three things, and decide in your planning, what stage of the interview you're going to go for them, but make sure that you're deliberate about going for those things and getting those things.
Yep.
Because you don't want to walk out of the interview and half an hour later go, I'm going to have to interview them again because there was that one extra question I needed to ask.
That was a nice 2-hour conversation.
Yeah, but I've just got one more thing. And so
that's actually something to
be very
mindful
clear
of
about what you need to take out of it.
Yep. The conversationalist, be mindful of those people. I'll sit here and talk to you all day long, but I won't actually answer your question.
Yeah.
So you need to be clear when you're framing up your big question, you're drilling into your smaller topics and you're fleshing out all that detail with your TIDs and your 5WH. You're actually getting the stuff that you need. You're not just getting lots and lots of transcript time. I think that's all from me. I could talk about this stuff all day. It's a fun topic. If you're into interviewing, I encourage you to get in and do more and more of it. It really is an art more than a science. It's practice, practice, practice. And just go back to those key things. It's about fairness. It's about being planned, organised, professional. You've thought about how you're going to deal with things when they arise in the interview. So when they happen, you're not going, oh, what do I do now? You're actually, you're prepared for those things. That's all from me. Anything else from you?
No, thanks very much, Paul.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Ka kite whana.